Spoiler warning! First off, let me just say that I know Fennec Shand was talking to Ventress in the Bad Batch episode 8 at the end. Sometimes I create goofy theory videos, just as I did with my last one, just trying to will something into existence. Even if I know it isn't likely. I know that's goofy logic, but we can talk about that later. Let's get into today's topic. We've always been shown the galaxy that is Star Wars from a certain perspective. That perspective is one of the side of the rebels and the Jedi. In the prequels, we followed the Jedi, the good Jedi who just wanted peace in the galaxy. Alongside the Jedi, we cheered for the clones of the Grand Army of the Republic. We didn't know much about them at the time, so there wasn't the emotional connection we had to Jedi like, Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda. Even Anakin Skywalker was a huge emotional drop when he turned to the dark side and became Darth Vader. But with the clones, we didn't know what was going to happen. Not during Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones. We knew the Jedi were going to be almost wiped out completely from the galaxy. We knew Anakin Skywalker would become Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious would rule the galaxy. But the clones, we didn't know. We didn't know they were going to turn on their Jedi generals, so yeah, it was a shocker when it happened. At least to me it was. And Revenge of the Sith only showed us clones who returned and murdered their longtime friends. But the Bad Batch is showing us something different. Where the Clone Wars animated series showed us the softer side of the clones and made us care even more that they turned, the Bad Batch is showing us the clones who didn't turn, or some of them. Yes, we saw Rex snap out of it in the Clone Wars Season 7, but he seemed to be a one-time off. But the Bad Batch is showing us a different perspective, one of dissidence among a lot of the clones as their inhibitor chips started wearing off. Okay, I've stated the obvious so far, so thank you for sticking with me through it. There's much more to the Bad Batch than that, though. And I've talked about this before, but have we been cheering for the wrong side the entire time? Well, that's a matter of perspective. Do we feel like we've been deceived by the stories in Star Wars? Well, it's also a matter of perspective. Yes, we know Palpatine was evil. I'm not debating that, and I'm not defending him. But this isn't entirely about that this time. His motives were different than that of the rest of the galaxy. But the Bad Batch is challenging what we believe to be right and wrong. And that takes us back to the Clone Wars. What was the Clone Wars about? Not the show, but the actual wars. Not why Palpatine orchestrated it. That's not what I'm talking about. We know the answer to that. But what did the Jedi, the bulk of the Republic, and the Separatists think it was about? That's a much deeper question. It's easy to get caught up in the black and white of good and evil. Yes, that's the root of it all in the Star Wars story, but when you have villains on both sides playing the war as a chess game, we have to wonder why the citizens went along with it. They didn't know it was being manufactured for a Sith takeover, but we see things starting to come to light in the Bad Batch Season 3. Sure, they touched on it a bit in the Clone Wars series, but the Bad Batch is really starting to highlight it all when we see two senators who once opposed each other now working together. Yeah, it all makes sense. I'm not a sci-fi writer, but I do write short horror stories, which I'll leave a link to that channel in the description and at the end of this video. But I do know a good twisted story when I see one, and Star Wars is a good twisted story. For the average galactic citizen, senator, or Jedi, or even separatist leader, the Clone Wars was about keeping the Republic unified or going their own separate way. That's it. And no, this isn't sympathizing with the American Civil War. This is a fantasy franchise, and I treat it as such. Are there seepings of modern politics and history in Star Wars? Sure, but I don't care about that aspect. If I wanted to watch modern politics, I'd turn on the news. I watch Star Wars to escape. And there's enough in it, other than modern politics, for my escapist brain to be happy. Anyways, the entire Clone Wars was about a certain number of planets wanting to secede from the Greater Republic ruling body. They felt they weren't getting the resources that the core worlds were getting and wanted to self-govern. But the Republic wasn't having that, and that's where it gets confusing. There are sovereign worlds within the Star Wars galaxy that were permitted to be self-sufficient. Anyone heard of Mandalore? Nal Hutta? Dathomir? Zygerria? What about all the Chiss Ascendancy planets? Still within the Star Wars galaxy, but separate from the galactic government, even during the Empire's reign. So why is it a big deal if Nemoidia or Sereno want to split as well? Obviously, it had been done in the past. Who are we to say that the Separatists weren't justified in wanting to be free from a republic that didn't care about them? All they wanted was the right to be their own thing. So we should have been following both sides of the war and caring about the individuals on both sides of that war, not just the narrow perspective we were shown, showing us that Palpatine was moderately right when he said the narrow dogmatic views of the Jedi. We were also given a narrow view, but Palpatine said he wouldn't allow the Republic, which had stood for 1,000 years, to be split apart. Well, we know the crazy aspirations of that guy, so anything he said was pretty much null and void, right? Again, the Bad Batch really highlights this notion that maybe the Clone Wars was unnecessary, at least in the eyes of the citizens. Allowing the planets to secede would have been preferable to what they ended up with. And I'm pretty sure the clones are starting to feel the same way. They died for nothing. Sure, the Republic remained as a whole, Empire, but they were just pawns in the bigger picture. Like I said in the beginning, we followed the Jedi as the heroic peacekeepers, but they went along with the war, even joined in it as generals and officers leading clones into battle, going against people who just wanted to live peaceful lives and be left alone. I'm not saying the Jedi were evil, not at all. They were duped like everyone else, including us. But they are supposed to be among the wisest of the citizens. Yet, when some senators wanted to go through with peaceful negotiations, the Jedi were there to battle it out. Let's take the other perspective, the side of the Separatists. Admiral Trench was following the wishes of the worlds he represented, fighting for an existence free of the restraints of the Republic. Does that make him evil? No, we just followed and were shown the perspective of the Republic, the Jedi, and the clones. Was General Grievous evil? He was doing the same thing as Admiral Trench. Sure, he killed Jedi, but this is war, and he was among the few beings equipped to fight against these superpowered beings. Okay, I've said some pretty inflammatory things here, but we can't look at one side or the other as evil, not from a citizen perspective or even military perspective. Only the leaders at the very top, Palpatine and Dooku. Yes, Dooku. He knew the Clone Wars was just a plan to create a Sith-ruled empire. He even tried to warn Obi-Wan Kenobi about it just before hostilities broke out on Geonosis, although he did try to play it off as he was fighting against the Sith Lord in charge of the whole thing. But for average citizens and even generals and lower officers on both sides, no one was really evil. We were just shown they were. They were fighting for what they believed in. Now we follow rebels who also fight for what they believe in, and that belief is the restoration of the Republic of the time before Palpatine, a time when worlds in the mid-rim and the outer rim were being ignored, used for their resources, and not compensated properly for it. But they aren't evil. They just don't see the error in what they created before. It was the Republic and the Jedi's actions that allowed Palpatine to rise, and now the clones are starting to see that. Getting rid of Palpatine is a must, even though it hasn't come to that point yet. He betrayed the clones. He betrayed the Bad Batch. He betrayed the citizens of the galaxy. Now they have to band together with whoever is willing to fight against him, creating another civil war in the Star Wars galaxy. This time, they're on the side of destroying the current regime, after they were pawns in helping putting him there in the first place. And that is the perspective we're being shown. Why don't we get a perspective from an average Imperial trooper? Think that's a silly idea? Ever read or see All's Quiet on the Western Front? It works. Just a thought, so think about it. I'm Gerald and I approve this message. Hit the subscribe button, like the video, and leave a comment. From one Star Wars fanatic to many others, thanking you for watching and wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. This is the way.